Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us for the Beyond Davos webinar, Responsible and Responsive Business, Responsible and Responsive Leadership, brought to you from Business in the Community. We're delighted you were able to join us, and we are very excited about a group of inspiring leaders who we have to talk to you this afternoon about, from BT, from Intercontinental Hotels, from the Business and Sustainable Development Commission, and obviously from Unilever. We're very excited to hear the key messages from Davos and to understand how these impact your business, how they impact global development, the Sustainable Development Goals, and the sustainability agenda at large. Thank you very much to Unilever and Keith Weed, the Marketing Communications Officer here at Unilever, who'll be chairing the webinar today, and he'll be sharing insights from Davos from his perspective and how Unilever are embracing the agenda. So before we kick off, just a few housekeeping rules for everybody. If you could please put yourself on mute, whether you are on the phone or via a computer, please put yourself on mute if you haven't done so already. If you have a question, simply type a question to the chat section provided in the GoToWebinar panel. Please also put in your name and organization and location if you can. Please type your questions throughout the session this afternoon, and we'll be collating these questions and answering them through our question and answer sessions during the course of the webinar. We have been oversubscribed, which we're delighted about, but that may mean if you do log in, you may have to log out again, and you may have trouble logging back in. So be careful not to log out. So I hand over now to Keith Weed, Marketing and Communications Officer and Chair of our International Leadership Team here at Business in the Community, and over to Keith to make introductions for our various panelists. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you, and hello, everyone. Firstly, I'm sorry we're a few minutes late. But as you can hear, you're later on going to hear from Luis from BT. And I reckon it's because we weren't using BT as part of this, he sabotaged the beginning of this webinar. So next time, I'm sure we'll all be loyal and on BT. So apologies we start a few minutes late. So let's quickly go into this to make sure that we use up the time. One thing I assure you, we will finish on time. What we have today, I think, is a good chance to engage with a topic which is important for so many businesses right now. In this ever-changing and challenging world, how do we shape our businesses to be fit for the future? How do we shape our businesses to reflect what's going on in the world and how we can make sure that we are competitive, not just for this generation, but for the generations to come? And one of the big challenges at the International Leadership Team for Business in the Community, which, as Sue said, I chair, we've been looking at, is the whole area of sustainable business models. To move on from having CSR, or corporate social responsibility, in one part of the business and leaving the rest of the business to get on with business as usual, but saying, no, we need to mainstream sustainability. We need to mainstream social and environmental sustainability and create a different type of business model for the future. And I suppose within that context, there were many businesses and civil society and governments at Davos discussing this. And we thought, what a good opportunity to bring back some of the things we all saw there and present it to the business community at large, so you get a sort of a sharing and insight which hopefully will be very relevant to your business and some of the business challenges you have. So what we're going to do is we're going to cover a broad spectrum of people who are at Davos, but also we're going to start off by talking about the Better Business, Better World report. Now, for that, Lord Malloch Brown, who is the chairman of the Business and Sustainable Development Commission, was going to present to us 20 minutes and do a Q&A. You might have noticed, those of you who are sharp, I use the past tense. Because in fact, Lord Malloch Brown is now in Nepal, having left yesterday at the request of the Prime Minister there to go and talk to them about elections and democracy, etc. And given that he's already there, I had a slight ultimatum to then say, well, it's fine you're there now, Mark, but we want a little bit of a video from you to introduce this very important bit of work, which he's done from his location in Nepal. And then really kindly, and they'll introduce themselves, but Jeff Seabright, who works for Unilever, Chief Sustainability Officer, who's done a lot of work on this, as you'll hear later, one of the co-founders of this report is my boss, Paul Polman, and hence Unilever's been helping that. But also importantly, we have Kale Clintworth with us, who's working very much on this. So she's going to be able to, from an insider's view, be able to say what's going on and what needs to be done, and presented on this many times. So thank you to Gail, thank you for Jeff for stepping in. I could have pretended either of them was Mark Malloch Brown, but Jeff's an American and Gail's a woman, and he's neither. So I can't pretend. But his video will be a part of that. And then we'll open the Q&A. Then after that, Luis Alvarez, who's the CEO of Global Services at BT, will talk. Yasmin Diamond, who's the EV of Corporate Citizenship at IHG, Intercontinental Hotels, will talk. Then I will talk about Unilever's perspective. And those three things are going to be feedback from what we felt and smelt in this area at Davos, for people to take that on board and either question or challenge. And then we'll bring it to a close and, as I say, end on time. So, with no further ado, we're going to tempt technology again, once, twice, third time lucky, and we are going to now move to the video of Lord Malloch Brown.
Keith, thank you very much, and I'm sorry not to be with you all in person this afternoon. As you will have gathered from Keith, I had to make a last-minute trip literally to the other side of the world, to Nepal. We tried to put a Himalaya in the background of this to persuade you that was the case, but the lighting didn't work, so accept a grim hotel room instead as my local setting. But I did just want the opportunity to introduce this report to you before turning over the mic and the floor to my colleagues. So look, a group of us, led by Paul Pullman and myself, but with a huge extra effort, if I might say so, from all the team at Unilever, a group of some 35 CEOs and civil society leaders, backed by a tremendous secretariat, have spent the last year making the case and gathering the research and the examples to make that case, that business needs to engage in what we've thought of as sustainable development, not just the incredibly important climate change agenda, which it's already well stuck into due to the leadership of many of you, but the broader sustainable development agenda as well. Agriculture, health and education, urbanization, renewable affordable energy, a whole set of issues which are going to shape the lives of so many billions of people, and where the current level of effort led by governments and the public sector in large part is just falling short and shorter year by year of the scale of the need. So this commission, the Commission on Business and Sustainable Development, is our effort to make the case for that investment and to show that there are literally, and we've costed out 12 trillions worth, there are literally trillions of dollars of opportunity to be found in areas that business has largely avoided till now, whether it is building the infrastructure of developing world cities, whether it is modernizing agriculture, whether it's putting private capital into sectors like health and education. These are areas where there is so much more to be done, with so much more potential commercial return for those who seize the opportunity of doing it. Correspondingly, we argue that if the private sector does not plunge into these new market sectors and new markets, then there is a huge cost, a lost opportunity, which will translate not just into new migration waves as environmental damage mounts and as the jobs and employment and opportunity are not there for people in the growing cities of the developing world, but also that costs around security, around spikes in energy prices as we deplete non-renewable commodity and energy pools, that all these things will put the world on a sort of status quo economy of decline. This is, in the era of Brexit and Donald Trump, a unapologetic report that believes that global integration on the right terms, around the right moral and ethical principles, and with respect for rules and regulations at the national level, will produce huge wins for all. And here's our case, and here's how we make it. And, you know, I very much hope, as you hear about our call for a responsible capitalism, long-term patient investment into these new areas of activity, and accept the call for responsibility that comes with that, to respect labour standards, human rights and environmental standards, to work on improving the conditions in supply chains and the rest. That as you hear for this call for a new relationship between business and society, it's one which I think all of you today on this webinar, given your interests, will, I hope, warm to and perhaps rise to and join us in what we hope is going to become not just a club of business leaders, a commission of business leaders, but a movement of business to quite simply and ambitiously, of course, change the world. Thank you.
And I would now like to introduce Gail Clintworth, who is the Business Transformation Director for the Business and Sustainable Development Commission. And she's going to kick off with a few words following on that, and then we'll go to Jeff and then the Q&A. So, Gail.
Right. Hi, everyone. I'm assuming that the slides are going to be going up, all right? I'm taking them up. Super. So what I'm talking about is the report that we published, Better Business, Better World. It's a year of research that was conducted in collaboration with a number of researchers around the world. And I'll talk a little bit about the Commission and the report. So first of all, why the Business and Sustainable Development Commission? Well, in fact, if you have a look at the people that are on the Commission, unfortunately only the logos of the companies are here, but the people on the Commission range from Paul Polman, obviously CEO of Unilever, Jack Ma, Global CEO of Alibaba and founder, Arif Naqvi, founder of the Abraj Group, Grant Reed, CEO of Mars, Gavin Wilson of the IFC, Mark Wilson of Aviva, all individuals in their own right have come together to say, we believe that the world needs to really get behind, business needs to get behind a different way of creating growth in the world. And so the first objective was to make the business case for the global goals, not as CSR, not as something that business needs to do because otherwise business is bad, but in fact there's a huge opportunity for business to get behind this. Secondly, their vision is to create a movement of like-minded CEOs. I hope some of you are on the line now, to really say if we all get behind something that can drive better growth in the world, in fact we can create a flywheel that will create a momentum that gets us onto a different trajectory of regenerative growth. And then finally develop an action agenda, both for their own companies and potentially more broadly, around commitments and initiatives that can support rather than replicate any existing efforts. So this is not another group over and above everything that's out there. This is a bit of a slow. It's stuck.
Oh, writing at the same time.
Oh, okay.
Okay, why don't we just point over here?
Okay. Right. So why now? Well, what is very clear for those of you obviously in the financial services industry, which I've recently come from, headwinds in the global economy are really impacting all of us quite badly. So we've seen the OECD growth falling decade upon decade since the 1960s. We know that we're in a low growth environment. 11 trillion of negative yielding bonds, and people don't quite know where to put their money right now. We've seen a slowdown in global trade since 2013, and that's why many business leaders need to run a lot faster than they felt they had to before. And China, which was our grand hope, the growth has halved since the 2010 peak. So in fact, CEOs are really thinking about where do they go for growth. And we thought, well, what a good idea to give them a new way to find growth. And why should we do that? Well, first of all, the current growth model we know, is that going to do it?
Point over here.
There you go.
Can you switch? All right. The current growth model is deeply flawed. Now, I want to just make sure that we don't overdo this, because in fact, we know that development over the last 30 years has lifted millions out of poverty, especially in Asia, and longevity is at an all-time high. So, in fact, there's a really good news story as a result of all the work we've done over the last 20 to 30 years. However, we know that natural capital destruction is costing us a lot, and that lot is 7.3 trillion in 2019, equivalent to 13% of global GDP. And whether you're talking fires, whether you're talking floods, or whether you're talking air pollution, we see it all around us, not least in London at the moment. Secondly, despite us having lifted many out of poverty and middle class having grown quite significantly over the last 30 years, we have a situation where we have decoupled average wages and far greater inequality, and we all see what is happening as a result of that in broader society. And of course, in the developing world, we still have 21 million people victims of forced labor. In fact, higher level of human slavery today than ever before in history. So our current growth model just isn't working for all of us, and even for those of us sitting in wonderful offices in the middle of London, we are experiencing the impact of that in our own lives and also in the lower growth. Next one. And of course, there's been a legacy of global burdens. So violence and armed conflict, we know, has cost us 9.1 trillion, 9.1% of GDP across the world. Biodiversity, smoking, obesity, corruption, alcoholism, all the fallouts of what I guess could be seen as the shadow of our great growth in consumption over the years. I won't go into the detail of this, but if you have a look on the right-hand side, you can see the little arrows that show you our prediction based on research of which of these trends are going to improve over the next 15 years. And in fact, virtually all of them are predicted to get worse unless we change our trajectory of growth currently. Next one. And so what we have said is the Sustainable Development Goals, which hopefully many of you have heard of, provide a better model for growth. The issue is that despite the Sustainable Development Goals for the first time having been developed by business and government and civic society, many businesses do not know what they are. In fact, I often use the rather risque joke that when I mention SDGs to the financial services community, they think I'm talking about a sexually transmitted disease. So let's not think that. Let's think about the Sustainable Development Goals and a potential better model for growth. And so going into the details of what this report says, and this I think is quite relevant for all of you, because what it is saying is not the world is in a terrible state and we all have a responsibility to fix it. But what this report is saying is that there's a huge growth opportunity for us all to get behind. Next slide, please. And the detail in the report shares a 12 trillion business value opportunity per annum that can be generated by 12 systems change opportunities. And I'll talk more about those. But we specifically have looked at food and agriculture, cities, health and well-being, and energy. And these are not just system change opportunities that are waiting to be born. They are in fact beginning as a trend. And our view is that the businesses that get behind this first are the ones that are going to create great competitive advantage, as I'm sure many of you are already seeing. We've also broken it down to what we call the 60 hotspots. So very specifically, which areas within these 4 systems are going to grow the fastest, and I'll talk more about those. And in fact, 12 of those hotspots are going to deliver the lion's share of this growth. So for those of you that are interested in future growth, this is the place to become quite forensic in where you put your money. There are, of these global business opportunities, more than 50% are located in developing countries. But for the first time, what is quite obvious is this is not just a developing country opportunity. This is a global opportunity, and developed and developing countries similarly can grow. And then finally, which I think is probably on everyone's agenda right now, we have seen that there's 380 million jobs available to be created in these systems, which is 10% of the global job market going forward. Next one. You won't remember any of this, but the report will be available for all of you to study in great detail. But the 12 market opportunities that we believe are the greatest. The first is around mobility, so new mobility systems. We know that over 60% of the world will be living in urban environments by 2030, up from 50% currently. That's 5 billion people. They need to move around. We know that they can't move around the way they're currently moving around because none of us will be able to breathe. And so there are new mobility systems that we're seeing coming up, which include electric vehicles, urban infrastructure, and transport. Similarly, new healthcare solutions, many of them digitally driven, and risk pooling of healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. So going down the 12 market opportunities, again, for those of you who are interested in investment or new growth, a very clear indication both in size of opportunity and in geographical area. And in fact, next slide. We have even broken it down to the point where you can identify in the report and in the background research exactly which of the 60 global hotspots are going 2 to 3 times faster than the global economy. So once again, for strategic planning for any businesses, there's a great new lens to have a look at growth going forward. And most importantly, for those of you that are concerned now about, first of all, stagnating growth, but secondly, I guess, a fair amount of concern around refugee movement. The fascinating indication here is that so much of this is going to account for development in the emerging markets. And then finally, which I know is on everyone, including all governments' agenda, in fact, top of the agenda, is what about jobs? And again, the report gives us a great deal of detail about where the jobs will be created. And in mobility systems and affordable housing and infrastructure build, significant number of jobs. Jeff, I hand over to you.
Thank you, Gail. And I think just move to the next slide. I think Gail has nicely laid out the case for engagement and the size of the prize. Why, in shorthand, why the SDGs need business and why business needs the SDGs for exciting new growth opportunities. But as with all big and important change, it doesn't come automatically, and business as usual is not going to get us to this destination. There are several critical obstacles and barriers that remain that we need to address. And here you see 4 of them that are called out in the report. The challenge around sort of the existing business models and mindset, a CSR mindset, if you will, which Keith alluded to at the very beginning, which I know BITC is very focused on. It is a bag of kind of creating a very new and dynamic approach with business culture. Capital markets rewarding short-term returns and the lack of longer-term incentives and other drag on the kind of change that we want to see happen, and the opportunity that we believe can be unlocked through the approaches outlined in the report. Policy distortions, whether it's perverse subsidies for things we don't want, like more heavy carbon energy, or unpriced externalities that are a drag, as Gail mentioned earlier, on the existing economy. Getting the right policy signals to help support and underpin the path forward is obviously critical. And then lastly, just sort of market behaviors and cost pressures that can have the perverse effect of creating a race to the bottom on labor standards and environmental standards as individual businesses seek to maximize their short-term unique opportunities and ignoring the broader challenge. So I think clearly obstacles are there. I think these are well familiar to most on the call. Business as usual is not going to overcome them. We're going to need real leadership and deep collaboration to do that. And so the report really outlines 5 key actions that we think are going to be critical to help achieve the promise and the potential outlined in the report. The first, which again is very aligned with the business and the community focus on sustainable business models, is to incorporate, not all necessarily, but relevant aspects of the global goals in individual company strategies. And I think that's fairly straightforward and self-evident. The second, a bit more complex and challenging, is how to drive transformation on a sectoral basis. That is, on many of these challenges, there are competitive pressures and issues, and if we don't do it together, it becomes very hard to get it done. And so working together on a pre-competitive basis to really have a race to the top as opposed to a race to the bottom. Example, Consumer Goods Forum has done, for example, in coming together around pre-competitive collaboration on commodities that address deforestation. The work sectoral strategies. Thirdly, working with policymakers, again to the question of public policy, to make sure that we're incorporating the full cost of natural and human resources, whether it's putting a price on carbon, which I think is pretty self-evident, should be, to the whole range of other externalities that we need to shore up the right policy environment. Fourthly, pushing for long-term financial orientation towards long-term returns. As has been noted, there's only $160 billion in development aid out there in the world today. We need about $3 to $4 trillion of investment to unlock the SDG potential. That's not going to happen if we don't crowd in private investment. And so working with new blended finance models and really helping create a competitive space that rewards businesses for stepping up and stepping in. So creating league tables and we're making these recommendations at a time when the credibility and trust in business, as the Edelman Trust Barometer that was released at Davos made very clear, and Richard Edelman is one of the commissioners, is at an all-time low. So a critical element of business stepping into this challenge is to, in a sense, underpin its credibility and trust through deepening the social contract around tax, paying fair tax, transparency, human rights, and many other elements. So rebuilding the well springs of trust between business and society to move this agenda forward. And then the last slide, and I'll draw it to a close, is really how we are going to, as a commission, begin to move this agenda forward in 2017. As Mark said in his video message, this is not about a report. The report is very important, and it is a stake in the ground, but we're really about trying to create movement. It's a business movement for better business. And so the first of our several goals will be to nurture and mentor the next generation of leaders, and our target is to recruit 1,000 CEOs in this effort. And each of the CEOs who are members of the Commission have made a commitment to reach out to their peers and counterparts, and we're very excited about that. Creating sectoral transformation roadmaps, again going to this sectoral collaboration agenda, and we're working hard with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development and others to create best practices and some toolkits and to help nurture sectoral roadmaps. Thirdly, at the strong urging of Mark Wilson at Aviva, looking at SDG benchmarking and creating global league tables that will help us really put SDGs at the heart of sort of the competitive benchmarking and create that race to the top that we believe is really critically important. Fourthly, the blended finance agenda, and we are in discussions with several partners about carrying that forward, including the World Economic Forum, to see if we can come up with some really powerful new tools. Tools like Gavi and tools like the recent fund that Unilever announced with the government of Norway and IDH around deforestation. These are examples of the kinds of things we want to see scaled up in a much broader context. And then lastly, to explore the idea of an independent responsible engagement index. This came up in many of the discussions in terms of rebuilding trust. This is about how companies bring their political voice of advocacy to this agenda and to make sure that it is consistent with their values and they're not saying one thing in their corporate reports and then doing another in their corporate advocacy in Brussels or Washington or what have you. So that is just a quick overview of some of the work, very exciting work that we're looking to do in 2017. And with that, I'll turn it back to Keith.
Great. Hey, thank you, Gail, and thank you, Jeff. So instead of one Mark Malloch-Brown, you get a Mark Malloch-Brown, a Gail, and a Jeff. So much appreciated. And thank you, everyone, for those who have already sent in some questions. So we have two Q&A sessions. We have one now, then we have the three panelists giving their reflection, and then we have a little gap for another Q&A. And seeing some of the questions I've got, some of the questions are actually applicable to the panelists. What I'm going to take just now, so apologize for those I'm pushing back, are the questions directly related to this. So there's questions about how was Davos, what was the mood, etc. Let's pick up those a little later on, because you might pick up a bit of that also from the panelist talk. So one really practical question to Gail and Jeff is, how do companies get involved? I mean, at a very basic level, how do you get a report? How do you engage? So where's the go-to?
All right. So if you go onto the web and type in Business and Sustainable Development Commission, you will find the website. If you also go onto the web and Google Better Business, Better Growth, you will find the report, and you will have a click-through to basically give us your name and we'll get hold of you. And then we'll see how you can possibly help us build this movement. Great.
Actually, there's a little bit of a follow-on question from that. There's one here about, can the BITC engage in this, or is this for individual companies?
Well, I'll let Gail speak as well, but absolutely BITC can engage in this. I mean, as I mentioned and Mark said, we're really looking to build a movement and looking at the work plan of BITC. It is extremely well aligned with the direction that we're certainly pushing, especially in the area of sustainable business models around human rights and much of the work. So absolutely as an entity, as well as individual companies, member companies of BITC.
And a question about sort of size and scale of companies. Clearly, what we've seen, the companies involved right now are large, multinational, international companies. What happens if I'm a national company? How relevant is this to me if I operate mainly in the UK?
Yeah, very relevant. So it's not only the big dogs that are involved. We have Vineet Rai, for example, who's a commissioner, who is an Indian-based independent financier. We have Helen High, who is Made in Africa Initiative. So individuals really who are particularly interested in this area and wanting to drive change are very welcome to get involved. And it doesn't matter how big one is.
And from this, is this a way of mobilizing sort of business and civil society and governments, as one so often hears from Davos, or is this a business-led initiative?
Well, I think the target audience for the Commission's work is and has been business leaders, both large and small and medium-sized business leaders. It's a business agenda. But as you can see from the Commission roster on the website, Rick and Patel from Avaz, for example, is a commissioner, and a very vocal and extremely constructive one. And so the idea here is to take all points of view into account, but with the specific focus on what it is that business can do to both to advantage itself and drive these critically important SDGs forward.
And then maybe a good final question is, following this year's Davos, following the launch of Better Business, Better World, what are your biggest concerns? Maybe one for each of you, and obviously Mark Malibran can't respond on his, but one from each of you. What is your biggest concern for the achievement of progress towards this Better Business, Better World? What's the unlock?
Well, I will just offer a perspective, which is that the degree of energy and enthusiasm that I think those of us who've been involved in this journey, and somewhat biased, obviously, by the experience, but the energy that of the commissioners that have come forward and the resonance that this had in Davos and with others with whom we've talked about it, people are looking for these kinds of positive contributions in a time when some of those options are not so evident. So I think this is a beacon of real opportunity and real hope, and I'm quite hopeful that it will generate a lot of enthusiasm and create a new narrative that will be an even more powerful narrative for the constructive role of business in an interconnected, interdependent world.
Thanks, Jeff. And let me add to that. So my biggest personal fear is that we'll end up with a report and another lovely lot of conversations that happened at Davos and intergovernmental and intercompany discussions, but there's no real action. And this needs to be about an action agenda which follows the money, honey.
Great. Hey, look, thank you very much. That's a great introduction to this topic. It gives a real feeling of what was done at Davos and also what needs to be done following Davos. And I say I'll pick up the broader World Economic Forum Davos type questions, including the is this just a big talk shop and other such questions later on. So before I do that, we're now over to the panelists. And the first up is Luis from BT. And if the technology works, he will suddenly be able to start speaking as I finish. And indeed, if you just ask for your presentation to advance, we'll advance it here. So over to you, Luis.
Thank you, Keith, and hi to everybody. I hope you can hear me well.
Now we can.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, I think that first of all, let me share with you a little bit about Davos and the impression of this year. I think that always when you go to Davos, people ask, oh, what was the mood, right? Probably I would say that you can find always extremely positive people and always people that if you speak with them more than 10 minutes, you will end being depressed. So I think that on the overall, what I took from Davos was that uncertainty is the new normal. I think with the number of events that happen in many different parts of the globe, here in the UK, of course, Brexit was very high in the agenda of the topics we discussed. Uncertainty, the lack of certainty in the future, but also the lack of certainty in the present moment is something that is the new normal. And in that sense, this generates a significant amount of stress on our people, our employees, our citizens, and the overall society. So I think that as a consequence of that, this is probably where it requires more than ever this kind of responsive and responsible leadership to address that. And if I take the responsive part, is being able to be ready to react, being able to take what is happening. And I've been talking to governments like the Minister of Industry from Brazil, who they decided to really take a number of actions on the new government in Brazil to their Congress to drive really certainty for the people and giving more opportunities for them to create new jobs, but also companies. And it was fascinating for me, especially coming from more the IT and telecom sector, the number of companies that in this uncertainty, they have decided to take more digital transformation as the opportunity to reinvent themselves in using the amount of data that is available, both from people, but also from advices how they can make their businesses better because they understand better the dynamics that they have to face on a daily basis. That was one example. It was a very fascinating debate as well around artificial intelligence and machine learning and how that is going to affect jobs in general in the globe, and probably this deserves another large conversation. But there was also a very good mood around using those technologies to improve the quality of the jobs that we have today. So that was about being responsive and being ready to react to what is happening in this new normal that we have. The other aspect was about being responsible. And I think it was also probably one of the best conversations that I had was with people that we were discussing how we make sure that being responsible is not only, of course, about how what you do in your business. It's also about how you do it, right? And I think that the reflection today to share around the Sustainable Development Goals is about how you embrace them into your business as usual, into your company, into your normal activity, rather than having like a separated even team or people that are just looking at this out of your normal business, right? And in that sense, I wanted to share with you, if that's okay, if, what we are doing in BT, because probably there is nothing better than sharing with you our experience. And we have learned a lot about this, right? So the first thing, my first recommendation to everybody is understand what are those Sustainable Development Goals, right? Because I think that the 17 and the dimension they have could differ a little bit on the things that we are normally used to live on our day-to-day operations in our businesses. So having a good understanding of what is the actual outcome we want to get is my first recommendation to probably every one of us, right? Once you have done it, at least what we have decided in BT was make sure that we align our business to them, right? And I think I have been lucky enough to hear the video from Lord Malloch, so I think that I was able to hear it, Keith, for your peace of mind. And it was quite interesting how we were going to make sure that in some of the messages, when you embrace this within your business, you are able really to drive a different set of activities. So we decided to say, well, let's go and first of all, signing on the United Nations Global Compact Principles and making sure that we implement those guiding principles in business and human rights, and also I think look into what means in terms of Sustainable Development Goals. But as I said, the guidance of making sure that it is totally linked to the business is because you have to make sure that this is aligned to what you do as your core activity. And in that sense, we became a founding member of the Global E-Sustainability Initiative. That is an initiative pretty much in terms of partnership in the information and communication technology sector. We have around 40 companies or so across the globe, and we have also partners in which we involve people like the International Telecoms Union or the United Nations Environment Program as a couple of examples. One of the things we've done, and I do recommend those of you who are interested on how technology is changing or can support these Sustainable Development Goals, is that we have published a report, and you can look the hashtag systems transformation, which is pretty much how digital solutions will drive this progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. And I think that we have a couple of things extremely positive, but also we identified, in line with the presentation you have just seen, a number of stoppers. On the positive side, the opportunity to really use technology to increase the quality of medical services, to improve agriculture with a smart agriculture, or to improve education and bringing people in a wider community around the globe. I think there is no doubt that there is that potential to really support those goals. In terms of stoppers, I think that in line with what we have seen, the political and regulatory constraints that we see, it's very interesting also how capital is used in infrastructure projects. Many times I use the example of Vive Digital in Colombia, right, where the government really took seriously how the investment on infrastructure could change the life of people in many parts of the country. We are heavily involved there with more than 700 small schools and locations where we provide some connectivity and services. And the third one that is another stopper is the lack of digital skills. I think that sometimes because we live in some places where technology or the digital technology is available for everybody, it looks like that is an easy thing, but managing the education journey, ensuring that we can teach the teachers is a very important activity. So what we have done is trying to act on a specific sustainable development goals. So we took, for example, on number 9, which is the industry, innovation and infrastructure. We are really investing heavily in making sure that there is availability of fiber broadband in the UK. We are making sure as well that fiber is not only available in the heavy busy locations, but also in remote places, making sure that we have now a target of having 95% premises by the end of 2020. One thing that is quite interesting is that, and I was surprised when I saw this, is 1 in 5 adults in the UK are still not online, or they lack the basic digital skills, right? So even in some developed countries, we also have the opportunity to influence on those goals. In terms of how we are linking this to the business, well, we are helping some of these people to be more integrated to avoid the digital breach by having special low-cost packages. We are also investing time and people. We have a volunteering program around tech literacy, and we are also ensuring that we do have more people in different places of the globe. We have a very nice project in connecting Africa, where in 30 villages we supply connectivity in a joint project with Coca-Cola. Right? And the final one that I want to refer to is also when you talk about clean energy or climate change, which are objectives or goals number 7 and 13. Well, there is clearly the use of technology can help both your customers to save a lot of carbon footprint because you don't need to travel, you can connect with people, you can do more things, companies and people. So I think that that is an opportunity, but also you can embrace and engage with your suppliers to make sure that they also take this as seriously as you are taking to do. So that was pretty much what I wanted to share, making sure that clearly we do have a significant opportunity to contribute. To me, to us, it has to be in BT with making this part of your business as usual, and that is a large opportunity.
Great, thank you very much, Luis, and we'll have a chance for you to answer some questions after the next couple of talks. So I'm going to hand straight over now to Yasmin, who's going to speak to you. So over you go.
Hi there, thank you, Keith. Hi, I'm Yasmin Diamond. I head up Global Corporate Affairs for Intercontinental Hotels Group. I thought I'd break my part into 2 elements. One is to give a little bit of colour on Davos, from our company's perspective and what we saw there, and secondly touch upon some of the areas that we're working on in terms of our sustainability and the whole agenda in this area. So overall, Luis has touched really very eloquently on the theme of Davos, which is responsive and responsible leadership. And I have to say, this is my 4th year that I've been to Davos, and I think it was the sharpest theme that they've had, and a theme that you could hang a number of things off, and it also much more resonated with where we currently are in this kind of the global world, the kind of very kind of fluctuating and unknown global world that we operate in. I felt there was a number of new and fairly different players in Davos for 2017. The kind of absence of the big kind of US government delegations, Joe Biden was the kind of main American politician there. The strongest Chinese presence that Davos has had, and actually just quite contrasting noises from what was coming from Davos and what was coming from across the Atlantic from the US in this kind of January period of handover. We often get asked about whether Davos is out of touch. I will leave others to make up their mind about that, but the mood for 2017 I felt was less kind of extravagant. There are certain things that you see at Davos that give you a flavour, and there were fewer of the big glamorous parties. It just felt a little bit more business and thoughtfulness. Not to say there wasn't entertainment, but it just wasn't in the same level that I have seen it in previous years. And there was, the last couple of years, Davos has had criticism levied at it around its kind of gender balance. And all this year, the gender balance of the delegates, I think there's around about 3,000 WEF participants, and of those this year, 21% were female, which is an increase of 18%. But I think there is still an undertone, and there's still conversations with regard to many still feel that momentum is too slow of increasing female leadership in the top of organizations. In terms of some of the big set pieces, there were three that I took away. The new leadership role of China and the speech made by President Xi Jinping was the first speech made by a Chinese premier. It was also alongside the largest Chinese delegation that the premier had, and we noticed it firsthand because we have quite a large hotel within Davos where we kind of saw a lot of the delegation.
They were staying there, weren't they?
They were staying there. And but in the keynote speech, what again, which I found so fascinating, was the Chinese president defending free trade and positioning China very much in the kind of globalization space, which is unusual from where we've been before. In terms of Brexit means Brexit, Theresa May departed from London, having made quite a landmark speech on the direction that she and her government will be pursuing on Brexit negotiations, the European Union. But in her speech in Davos, she really focused and urged global business community to join her on the journey that she is on, which is improved corporate governance for corporations and responsible leadership, as well as citing her own quite clear passion for improvements to ending modern slavery, which is something that she's put a lot of store behind. And as I said, the third part, the American, in terms of President-elect at the time, Donald Trump, did not attend, but the new administration's Anthony Scaramucci, who's the director of the White House's public liaison and intergovernmental affairs, he was there and was very much talking in terms of that the fixing the American problem is a 5 to 15 year journey, as opposed to something that can happen in the next couple of years. The final thing in terms of overall Davos and the mood was there was again a fair amount of conversations around. There was a lot of voices of inclusion, and that includes financial inclusion as well as inclusion in its broadest context, which is where normally the inclusion debate lies. And that was both inside the Congress Center with, as I said, Theresa May, and also business leaders like Jack Ma, but it was also on the fringes. And it was, for me, good to see that debate, which was inclusion in its broadest context, taking actually quite a center stage. So that's my little colour from Davos. I'm sure my colleagues around the table will have varying degrees of colour. The part for me that I was asked to say, what does IHG get from going to Davos? And we have a very distinct reasons for going there. Firstly, we're a huge, large global organisation, meeting owners of our hotels, the third-party owners, meeting governments, and meeting big commercial partners, we would just have a ridiculous carbon footprint if we tried to do that by flying around the world. Davos gives us an opportunity to have those key players together so you could actually either progress relationships, create new ones, and cement existing ones. And we also use it as an opportunity to launch our trends report. So I just wanted to put up the trends report. And this year we talked about the uncompromising consumer, which is addressing a number of paradoxes. And this is uncompromising in a customer in a positive way, not in a negative way. And we have four obviously key paradoxes there. But I want you to just flick to the next slide, because one that that comes out really strongly is responsible individualism, which in terms of travelers, people want to travel. They want to better me in a better way, so they don't want to go into different parts of the world and just take what they can. There's something about giving back, and it's not just altruistic, it's what they're doing actually makes a difference. And so that was quite a strong theme, and it leads me just to my final point, which is around, and I think Louis said it earlier, and I think Gail and Jeff touched upon it, which is in our organisation we don't have a tag on box called CSR, being responsible. For us, it's very much part of our DNA, because we can't really operate if you have it in a little box by its side. But also what's crucial is that it goes to the grain of your organisation. So it's not something that can't be sustained by the organisation. And so for us, we've created a new IHG Foundation just in the last year, which we're very, very excited about. But we have some very clear programs that just help our business and our colleagues really contribute, and it helps the people and the communities in which we work in. So we have environmental sustainability that we have for our hotels, and that is helping to drive the cost down for our hotels, but also helps the community in terms of energy consumption and water consumption. We have the IHG Academy, where we work with local communities and educational providers to train a whole range of people in local communities to work in hospitality. And that was started in China 10 years ago, because we had such a growth in hotels in China, and we needed people to be able to work in that sector. And just in 2016, we've actually had 12,000 graduates from the IHG Academy program, which we partner with around about 75 countries now. And the third area is disaster relief. Hotels tend to be the center of a community, and when disaster strikes, they also provide a lot of shelter, they provide support, and also we help our hotels and the local communities prepare for shelter, have very good preparedness. So for us, those are the three main areas we're working, because it's very part of our business and it really is part of our DNA. So Davos for us is important. It gives us business access, but also it lets you kind of stand back a little bit and hear from political, global, academic, commercial leaders about where the big kind of themes are, where the big trends are, and makes you reflect more on what you're doing and whether you're either keeping pace or outpacing them. So overall for us, Davos is a good thing for us.
Great, thank you very much. So one final reflection from myself, and then we'll open up to Q&As. Thanks for the Q&As that have arrived, and please keep them coming. I'm Keith Weed, and as you can see on the slide here, I'm the Chief Marketing and Communications Officer for Unilever. I start with a slide, or a picture I took myself. This probably, I think, is one of the major challenges that Davos has. As you can see, the sign is covered in snow. It's in a snowy ski resort. I think if it could be chosen again, this would be the last place you would choose. Snow is incredibly impractical to get there. Secondly, people are clumping around wearing suits and business attire, but also snow boots because it's snow. But last but not least, it's in a ski resort. So I think, in some ways, it pulls upon itself some of the parodies, and of course, pictures of people being interviewed with beautiful mountains behind them doesn't really conjure in the mind, people dying of poverty and malnutrition. On top of that, I think there is the whole challenge of those who attend, and of course, as always, those who are highlighted who attend are the celebrities. Let me just stress, the vast, vast majority of people who are there are not celebrities, as witnessed by the people speaking today. And they are in three groups: business people, civil society, and governments. And I'd just like to echo what Luis and he hasn't said, as far as at the end of the day, it's a very effective way of getting people together. And I think it sort of recognizes that this world is in such a challenging place that we can only get solutions if the major bodies of those three come together and work together to create solutions. And that's why I think this work around this a better business, better world is an important thing to highlight. I'm going to reflect on three themes that I pulled out. Of course, there are themes that resonate with Unilever and myself because these are the things we're focusing on. The first is around the area of inequality and gender. And if you haven't read the Oxfam report called An Economy for the 99%, it was released on the 16th of January, and I'd encourage you to download a copy. It has, as always, a very good, catchy sort of call out. The one this year was the top 8 people in the world have the same wealth as the bottom 3.5 billion. And if you think 8 people having the same wealth of 3.5 billion, I think you can see this lack of balance we have and the need to focus the economy that benefits everyone, not just the privileged few. And I think that gap is a gap we're seeing over and over again coming back in businesses, in countries, and indeed a challenge for all of us. I think the vast majority of people accept that some people earn more than others. That is not the issue. It's when the gap becomes that size, people start challenging it. And one of the areas around inequality is around women and girls. And we had a program, a partnership with Oxfam for our brand Surf, which is a washing powder, which highlights the unpaid care work and the challenging of social norms that allow us to perpetuate. And of course, this is around household chores. It's about working within communities, both in caring or indeed collecting water. All these tasks led by women and girls, not recognized economically and not recognized as a load that should be shared across the family. And it's a partnership, the largest, I believe, in this area that I'm looking forward to develop and scale. But it's a way that our brands, everyday brands like laundry brands, can engage in everyday challenges around washing, care, household cleaning, etc. But have a look at that Oxfam report, because on economy that says it incredibly well. Now, of course, inequality, I was talking initially there about economic inequality. There's inequality about gender as well. And this is a picture of a panel. That's me in the middle at the back there. To my left, I have Zainab Salabi, who is a journalist of New York Times, who was moderating the panel. Next to me, there is the from UPS, the Chief Sales and Solution Officer, which is Kate Gutman, myself, and then next to me on my right, that's Tom Zilli, who is the head of UN Women, and the next to me is Kristen Lemkow, who is the CMO of JP Morgan Chase, and last but not least, on the far right, is Sheryl Sandberg from Facebook. And we were highlighting a bit of research around stereotypes and how stereotypes hold back women's advancement, not just in the workplace, but in life in so many ways. And the research exposed that 60% of women and 49% of men believe that stereotypes personally impact their career or life or both. And actually went on very interesting to peel that onion about what both men and women, and the truth of the matter is those stereotypes fit on both sides very clearly, impinge on the way we can advance greater diversity and greater quality in gender. It also builds on a piece of work that we did around advertising and saying that our advertising should portray more balanced gender as well, as far as playing back to the rest of the world what sort of world this should be. So that was one theme around equality and gender. But another theme I picked up was around technological disruption. And as I said earlier, I think the responsible leadership and being responsive to that is a very good theme for this year. But if I look back to last year about the fourth industrial revolution and the impact of technology, I think two of them come together incredibly well around disruptive technology and how we use that to be more responsible. One of the projects that we've been working on with Grow Asia, Facebook Basics, and the Unilever team has been M-Pharma, small m, capital F, M-Pharma. And this is a mobile platform for increasing farms' productivity, profitability, and environmental sustainability through a platform for smallholder farmers that gives them free mobile internet and access to information such as weather reports, routes to market, mobile money, etc. And I thought what was really exciting around that was we actually had some traction. We'd already launched it in Indonesia, and we're launching it across Asia. It's a completely collaborative platform. If you're part of Grow Asia, anyone can use it. So here's an example of something Unilever's built. Other companies have done something similar, but it's open to anyone. And the idea is through this, we'll get better farming and we'll get better product and more responsible. I had the fortune to be part of the session on digital transformation for industries, which the World Economic Forum hosted, and I led something around digital transformation and how this will impact society. And of course, this is a good example of it. But again, if I look at the Matter Fund from Shriv Kemkers, and that is an intelligence and discovery-based platform aimed at bringing international education development out of the dark ages and using technology to bring that into today's world. Third theme for me was sustainable agriculture, and quite simply there, we're a big tea company, we're a big ice cream company, and if I took vanilla as an example, right now 80% of the world's vanilla is coming from Madagascar. 90% of the population live on less than $2 a day, and there's some real challenges about creating sustainable vanilla for all the vanilla ice cream, which I know you eat and enjoy. So we've worked with Simrise, Giz, which is the German DFID, and Save the Children in a partnership to improve the livelihoods of the vanilla farming communities in Madagascar, planning to reach 50,000 people, 10,000 homes, but doing it in a way that creates a sustainable supply chain. I was on the board of stewards for the World Economics Future Consumption Initiative, and this is exactly the sort of things that business needs to think about, not just what they're doing, but look back into the extended supply chain, into what needs to be done elsewhere. Which brings me on to a thought which pulls that all together in the area of sustainable development, and indeed, really why we're doing this webinar today. The thought being is how do we create more sustainable business for the future, and how does that drive business? Not just because it's good, it's because it's good for business. Lifebuoy is a bar soap, you can see here. It used to be big in the UK back in the late 1800s. It's now big in Asia and Africa. Quite simply, one of the best ways you can keep a child alive to the age of 5, it's a critical time to the age of 5, is just good hand washing. There are literally millions of children that lose their life every year through avoidable diseases like diarrhea and infections that the humble bar of soap can solve. And we've already taught over 400 million people how to wash their hands properly. Clearly, it very much aligns to the SDGs, and we announced in Davos a project with Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, about how they were going to do the immunization, we were going to do the hand washing, and that's obviously very good for the future health of people in challenging areas. However, the point I'd like to stress that over the last 10 years, Lifebuoy has tripled its sales from 237 million euros to 744, and doubled its market share from 24% to 45%. There's a business case here. Doing right for people is right for business. So to me, I'm very keen on connecting the two together. And I'll end on one final slide to say that there are other things that we can do when you look back at your business. We produce an awful lot of packaging in Unilever. And we use Davos not only just to engage with other people who can help us, indeed the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which does work on circular economy, was there amongst others, but also to make commitments to hold ourselves to account and hold our suppliers to account. And one of the big challenges right now, of course, is around packaging in the world. The more people, the more packaging, the more product. There's one line that comes out of thought leaders that say that by 2050 there'll be more plastic in the sea than fish, unless we do something different. So one of the things we said is by 2025 all our plastic packaging will be reusable, recyclable, or compostable. That right now is impossible to do, but I think we've learned in Unilever if you set yourself big objectives, people work with you to help achieve them, and that's every intention that we want to do. So on that note, I'm going to stop. I'm going to hand over to some Q&As for another 5 minutes, and then we'll bring it to a close. So rapidly, moving on to the Q&As. Luis, we have a very direct question here for you, as far as just people trying to understand what percentages of businesses are from a country perspective. So the question here, how are you going to look at the SDGs from a country perspective? Someone from Spain asking the question. So we've talked about these global objectives, but a question back to you, Luis. How about from a country perspective?
Well, I think that thank you for the question. I think that it's quite clear that the global targets do apply also to a specific countries. So when we look, for example, on how we apply our portfolio to ensure that we support our customers, it applies to any country in which we operate. So it means that any customer can benefit from reducing the amount of travel they have to do by using, let's say, conferencing services. So I think that is just one example. The other example is that we do have projects on digital inclusion in Spain, for example. So I think that these are the kind of things that we do, and of course they apply wherever we operate, right?
Okay, so the thought being there's some global themes, but of course when you get into a specific country, it's what's right for the country that maps that across, which actually probably in some ways leads me on to the next question. I don't know who's going to answer this one. Maybe we have to go back to Jeff and Gail, but the question here is, what percentage of business have signed up to the SDGs in the UK? Do you see the goals becoming mandatory in the future? Do we have any idea of percentage of business signing up?
Not in the UK. What we do know is that globally, in some work that both GlobeScan and, I think GlobeScan, 1/3 of businesses interviewed said that they are considering it within their corporate strategy. 2/3 didn't know what it was. Will it be mandatory? Well, I don't think it will be mandatory, so it's not mandatory for anyone. However, we are, as part of the Business and Sustainable Development Commission, beginning to ask, for example, the Task Force on Climate Change in terms of the financial disclosure to start thinking around including SDGs, so that we will create transparency and league tables to be able to show, ideally to the public, exactly how many companies are doing something useful.
Okay, thank you. It might be interesting from a BITC perspective. I know that's something we've been discussing with one of our new members of the leadership team, about whether we do a little bit of research, because I think a baseline to understanding where we are and hence where we want to get to would be good. So maybe that's something we at BITC could pick up that thought. Another question here, again, I open up to whoever would like to answer from the panel. Is there a balance between the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or is there a bias to more traditional pillars, e.g. environmental efficiency?
Well, I mean, I think, this is Jeff Seabright, I think the goals are meant to be a kind of a comprehensive roadmap for both environmental and social progress. And they apply differentially. This goes to the question about country specific, but the specific needs and priorities within each individual country, and even within countries, within regions and provinces, et cetera. there will be things that will be highlighted that will be more urgent and greater priority than others. But it was obviously the subject of several years of negotiation and massive stakeholder outreach by the United Nations across the world, to businesses, to NGOs, civil society, governments, obviously. And the intent is that between and among those 17 goals, you leave no one behind and no aspect of the planetary boundary challenge unaddressed.
And just to build on that, individual companies and corporations will probably over-index on some of them because they can do more in a certain space. So if you look at it as a collective, then as a collective, the 17 will get covered. But it doesn't mean that you've got to do a tick box for every company to do 17 and show that progress.
Yeah, and in fact,
Louis.
Sorry. Yeah, no.
Louis.
In fact, I was going to say that my recommendation is that if you are in a specific company or business, you just pick 1 or 2, 3 maximum, and you don't try to boil the ocean trying to do all of them.
Yes, I agree on that very much. So it's Keith here. I think the way it really works is if you can pick ones that resonate with your business.
Yeah.
I must admit, in the early days of doing this role in Unilever, I was very much wed to the idea of brands with purpose, brands with meaning, brands that matter, whichever sort of theme you want, and trying to get social causes behind our brands. But the ones that stuck and the ones that really drove our business and made our brands stronger and better and more engaging were the ones that aligned with what the brand stood for. And I think that's the same for business. The trouble is, I find about the corporate social responsibility that if you do have a project to do something good, X, Y, Z, if it doesn't really connect with your business, it's hard to resonate with the people who work with you, but also it's a very easy thing to be cut when times get tougher. And if you can pick one of the Sustainable Development Goals, or 2 or 3, that actually fit closely with the business that you're doing, I think, it makes it a lot easier to go back to your management, your boss, and explain why you're doing it. So it's not about the lion in the local zoo. It is about how we're going to sort out recycling because we produce an awful lot of packaging. It makes sense. And then on top of that, you'll find that your consumers and customers will resonate with it more. And it will help build business. Within Unilever have found that we can build our businesses ahead of our other brands, with the brands that really resonate in this area and have strong social and environmental delivery and purpose. So on that note, I'm actually going to bring it together. I do have to apologize. We've got more questions. There's many more gossipy questions about Davos, which I've avoided. It's clearly what people really want to hear is the glam, the glitz, and the dirt. But I'm afraid you're going to have to go online and read about that on Facebook and Twitter and other things. And let me bring it to a close. And thanks very much, Yasmin Diamond, for joining us. Luis for joining us from BT as well. Luis Alvarez. And indeed, Gail Clintworth and Jeff Seabright, who did a very good job of impersonating Lord Malek Brown. And I'd just like to conclude with 2 thoughts. One of which is, thank you for joining this webinar. Because at the end of the day, you can only spend your minute once. You're all busy people, and you've spent the minutes here. And why I say thank you, because we are only going to make a better momentum around this whole challenge of mainstreaming sustainability if more people get involved. And more means more in this case. So if you've been listening to this and it's found in some way an inspiration for you to take back into your business, or find a different way, or giving you confidence that what you're doing you should do more of, or challenging what you're not doing and you should do more of, whatever the inspiration it's given you, it's been well worth all our time in investing in this. But I think it is important that businesses take a more responsible approach to how they do business. And indeed, consumers and customers are increasingly asking for it. The second thought I'd like to leave you with is this notion about mainstreaming sustainability. We can't have social and environmental sustainability as an afterthought, as a nice story to write up and put into the annual report. It really needs to be owned by everyone. It's not to be owned by the people who do this in Department X. It needs to be owned by all the people across the business. And in doing that, I think we'll build a better business and indeed a better world. So for a couple of final words, over to Sue. Sue.
Hello, thanks everybody for joining us this afternoon. I hope you found it as an inspirational afternoon full of thoughts and ideas, and thanks very much for your participation. Again, thank you to Gail, to Jeff, to Jasmine, to Luis, and Keith, of course, to you. Thanks very much indeed for hosting us here at Unilever and giving us all your support. During the course of the session, we've been running a few polls, and I'm encouraged to say that 87% of the people who responded have said that they are addressing the SDGs, they're working on the SDGs. 4% said no, and 9% didn't know, which is interesting. There's something for them to go and find out. And then in terms of how are they addressing the SDGs, 72% are incorporating the SDGs into their business, 67% are working with peers, 33% are working with policymakers, 44% are pushing for long-term investment, sustainable investment, and 39% are looking at rebuilding the social contract. So it's encouraging that so many people on the call have actually been looking at how they can engage and incorporate the SDGs into the way they do business. This has been a really exciting afternoon. I hope you've enjoyed it. We're going to ask you and send out to you at the end of this call in the next couple of hours a short survey that we really encourage you to fill out, please. We want to know more about what you're doing, why you're doing it, where you're doing it, and how you're doing it. And we'll share that back with all of you once we have that data. We really do want to push forward on this agenda, and it's only by working together, wherever we are, whatever we work within, whether it's a business, a charity, civil society or another form, government, we have to work together to achieve these goals together. So on that note, thank you very much indeed, everybody. We really appreciate everything that you're doing and you are going to be doing. And I have to say it, if we don't do it, we are not going to build a fairer society and we're not going to get to a more sustainable future. It is all of our problem. We need to address it. And for those of you who are out there who tell us that you're already incorporating the SDGs into your work, and I'm going to make the plug, if you haven't heard about it and you haven't done it, you've got the next few days until the 17th of December to enter, February, what am I saying? Until the 17th of February to enter our Global Development Award, which Unilever are sponsoring. We've had some fabulous examples over the last 15 years of incredible examples of what companies are doing to address the global development agenda. If you're doing something, and many of you are, tell us, enter the award, look at our website, and you'll see it there. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. It is 4:30 on the head. We say goodbye, and thank you for joining us, and have a good rest of the day. Goodbye.